Sir, my late father had the same birthmark. The silver fork froze mid-air, and from that moment on, Ethan Caldwell's world would never be the same. Charleston, South Carolina. A warm spring evening draped the city in magnolia-scented air. Inside Langford Hall, the crown jewel of Southern elegance, a grand gala pulsed with the quiet power of generational wealth. Tuxedos glided, silk gowns shimmered. Jazz curled softly from the grand piano on the mezzanine, playing Moon River like a lullaby for the elite. At table 6, Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, land developer, the man whose name adorned half the historic blocks of Charleston, sat flanked by donors and legacy board members. This was his kingdom, and tonight was another effortless coronation, until she approached. She wore a simple black uniform, hair pulled back neatly, and carried a tray of sparkling water with the ease of someone used to going unseen. But when her eyes met his, something shifted. She stopped beside his chair, looked him straight in the face, then pointed gently at the inside of his left wrist. "Sir, my late father had the same birthmark, right there." The room didn't go silent, but to Ethan it might as well have. He looked down, and there it was, the small, crescent-shaped mark, barely the size of a dime, a faded moon pressed into the skin, long ignored, long forgotten, until now. She didn't waver. Her voice held a tremor, but not her gaze. "My mom used to tell me, if I ever saw a man with a crescent mark like that on his left wrist, I should remember it, because my father had it, and he disappeared before I was old enough to remember anything else." Ethan stared at her. Everything inside him told him to look away, but he didn't. To his right, Julia Reese, his assistant, leaned in and whispered, "Sir, we can have security." He lifted a hand. Quiet. The girl gave a small nod. Not an apology, not a plea, just a silent acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked away through the polished ballroom floor, slipping back behind the staff doors like a shadow exiting the stage. He didn't move, not for a long time. That mark, that voice, and the name that had haunted the back corners of his memory for 2 decades. Rachel Monroe, the girl with paint-stained fingers, the woman who once said, "I don't want your empire, Ethan. I want your courage." And he hadn't had it. Back in the staff corridor, Ava Monroe braced herself against the beige wall. Her heart thudded wildly. Her supervisor's voice barked something about professionalism and boundaries, but the words didn't land. All she could hear was the silence in his eyes. Not anger, recognition. Later that night, inside her cramped apartment off South Battery, Ava sat cross-legged on the bed. The room was dim, lit only by the lamp over her desk. On the corner of her mirror was a photo. Her mother, Rachel Monroe, age 22, in a hospital gown, cradling a newborn. Taped beside it was an envelope, yellowed with time. No address, just one word on the front, Ethan. Ava unfolded it carefully, her fingertips trembling. "If our daughter ever finds you, please don't turn away. Please let her know she came from something real. Not a mistake, not shame, something real." She stared at her reflection. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. And now, maybe, just maybe, a shared birthmark. "Mom," Ava whispered, "I think I found him." Across the city, on the 41st floor of Caldwell Tower, Ethan stood alone in the dark. No tie, no jacket, just the lights of Charleston flickering below like a city built on choices. He looked at his wrist. The mark was still there, untouched, unexplained, unavoidable. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Caldwell felt something he didn't know how to name. Not fear, not guilt, something older. A reckoning. The letter had sat in Ava's drawer for years. Folded, aged, edges curled like the corners of old photographs. Her mother, Rachel, had written it with her favorite fountain pen, the one that always smudged ink if she pressed too hard when she was angry or afraid. Ava had stared at the envelope more times than she could count. Not to read it. She knew every word by heart. But to wonder why it had never been mailed. The name on the front, Ethan Caldwell. No stamp, no address, just a single name, written in her mother's neat, deliberate script. The same script Ava mimicked every time she filled in her sketchbooks. She laid the letter on her lap now, sitting cross-legged on her small bed, her knees pressed against the edge of her desk. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and charcoal, remnants of her art supplies. A candle flickered beside her, throwing soft shadows across the paper. "Why didn't you send it, Mom?" she whispered aloud. Maybe Rachel had been scared. Maybe she believed silence was kinder than rejection. Or maybe, just maybe, she had waited too long, and by the time the fear passed, Ethan Caldwell had become untouchable. Ava unfolded the letter slowly, reverently, like it might crumble if she breathed too hard. "Dear Ethan, I don't know what you remember of me, or if you even want to. I'm not writing to reopen old doors. I'm writing because there's someone who may one day want to open them anyway. Her name is Ava. She has your eyes. She laughs like you used to laugh, when you forgot to be serious. When you used to draw on napkins in the coffee shops and say things like, 'Legacy is just the long shadow of fear.' I didn't tell you when I found out. I didn't think you'd want to know, and I was afraid that telling you would give you power over her, the kind you didn't ask for, the kind you might not want. But, more than anything, I was afraid you wouldn't care. If she ever finds you, please don't look away. Please don't let your name be louder than your heart." Rachel, Ava traced the last line with her finger, her throat tightening. She had read it 100 times, and still it hit like it was the first. Her mother had fought her own battles in silence. She'd given Ava everything, without bitterness, without drama, without ever once saying that Ava was owed more than what they had. But now Ava couldn't ignore the weight of what was missing. Not anymore. She reached for her sketchbook, flipped it open to a blank page. The pencil moved before she thought. First, a pair of eyes, then a wrist. The crescent mark, a hand outstretched, unsure whether it was reaching out or letting go. The next morning, Ava rode the bus to the Charleston Public Library. Not to check out books, not even to read, to sit in silence, to think. The top-floor reading room overlooked the harbor. Sunlight poured through tall windows. Ava curled into one of the chairs by the far wall, the letter folded in her pocket like a second heartbeat. She took out her phone and searched his name. Ethan Caldwell. Google returned dozens of results. Articles, interviews, foundation announcements, real estate projections. But it wasn't until she found a 1999 article from the Charleston Gazette that her breath caught. Youngest Caldwell to launch South Battery Project. Accompanying the article was a photo. Ethan, age 23, stood in front of a mural being painted on a brick wall in the historic district. And in the corner of the frame, bent over her paints, was Rachel. Ava blinked. Her mother was there, in the background, paint-splattered overalls, barefoot. He had seen her. He had known her. Ava zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Rachel was smiling. So why had no one ever spoken her name since? Across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse office, the city spread out like a puzzle below him. The skyline was sharp with new developments, projects that bore his name, his legacy. But none of them mattered this morning, because on the desk in front of him sat an old photograph. A woman, barefoot beside a riverbank, pregnant, her hands cradling a rounded stomach. He didn't recognize the picture at first. Then he saw the eyes. Rachel. He opened the drawer beside him and pulled out the envelope that had arrived just yesterday, slipped under his door with no return address. Inside it, a sketch, drawn in pencil. 3 hands. One old, one small, and one in between. All marked with the same crescent. The sketch was signed Ava. He ran his thumb over the edge of the drawing. She doesn't want money, he thought. She wants to know. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in 20 years, let the memory return. Rachel in the garden, humming while she painted. Rachel in the courthouse parking lot, crying without sound. The sun was barely up when Ava stepped out onto the balcony of her apartment. Charleston was quiet in that golden hour stillness the streets below washed in warm light and dew. In her hand, she held her phone, unlocked, open to the voicemail icon. One new message. She hadn't returned the call. Not yet. The voice had been steady, low, familiar in a way that made her skin prickle. Miss Monroe, this is Ethan Caldwell. I would like to speak with you privately, at your convenience. No pressure, just clarity. He hadn't said the word daughter, hadn't said sorry either, but something in his tone made her chest tighten. She played it again, then she deleted it. Across town, Ethan stood at his office window, unmoving. The skyline of Charleston unfolded like memory, solid, grand, untouchable. But inside him, everything was unsettled. Mark Ellison had sent the report the night before. Ava Monroe, age 21. Studied art education at Carolina College of Design. Part-time waitress at Langford Hall. Lives alone in a studio apartment off South Battery. No father listed on birth certificate. Mother, Rachel Monroe, deceased. But it was the final page that made Ethan sit down. A candid photo, recent. Ava walking down King Street, headphones in, sketchbook under one arm, the other hand stuffed in the pocket of her faded jean jacket. She wasn't looking for attention. She carried herself like Rachel had, quiet fire under soft edges. Beside the photo, Mark had written, "No signs she wants money. No contact with press. Not a threat. Seems like she just wants to know." Ethan pressed the photo flat on the desk. He had known silence. He had used it. But Ava was asking for something else entirely. Witnessing. Ava didn't go to work that day. She found herself walking the streets of Charleston instead, winding past the old brick alleys, past moss-covered gravestones, past things that never seemed to change. At a corner cafe, she sat at an outdoor table and opened her sketchbook. The pages flipped in the breeze like wings. She didn't draw. She just sat with the weight of her decision. Then her phone buzzed, the unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Miss Monroe?" the voice asked, more cautious this time. "This is Ethan Caldwell. I hope this isn't a bad time." She was silent for a beat. "I got your message," she said finally. "Thank you," he replied. "Would you allow me to meet you, somewhere neutral, just to talk, no expectations?" Ava looked around. The city seemed to hold its breath. "Tomorrow," she said, 10 a.m. "I'll text you the address." She ended the call, and then let herself exhale. The next morning, Avery and Son's Book and Brew was nearly empty. Ava chose it deliberately. Her mother used to sketch in the back corner, between shelves of old poetry and dusty coffee canisters. The smell of cinnamon and ink still lingered in the air. She wore a gray coat, simple earrings, no makeup. At 9:57 a.m., Ethan walked in. Alone. He looked older than in the newspapers, thinner, a bit tired, but not frail. When he saw her, he paused, then walked over slowly. "Miss Monroe," he said. "Mr. Caldwell," she replied, not rising. He nodded and sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ava let the silence stretch. She had always gone first, always asked first, always hoped first. Not today. Finally, Ethan said, "Thank you for agreeing to this." "I didn't do it for you," she replied. He accepted it. "Fair." Another pause. "I read your blog," he added. "All of it. Then you know why I'm here." "You want answers." She met his gaze. "I deserve them." He looked down, nodded slowly. "I didn't know about you. Not until that night. When you pointed to my wrist, I saw her. I saw Rachel." Ava blinked, but said nothing. "I should have asked back then," he continued. "I should have wondered, but I was afraid. Of my family, my name, of what it would cost." She tilted her head. "And what did it cost?" He met her eyes again. "Everything that mattered." She said nothing. The coffee between them grew cold. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. Rachel, pregnant, barefoot beside a river. He placed it gently on the table. Ava's breath caught. "She sent this to me," he said. "I never opened the envelope, not until last week." Ava pressed her palm to her mouth. She couldn't look away from her mother's face. So strong, so alone. Ethan's voice softened. "She gave me a chance to be brave, and I wasn't." Ava looked up. "And now?" He didn't flinch. "I'm not here to rewrite the past. I'm here because I don't want to hide from what's left." She studied him, his hands, his posture, the lines in his face. "I don't want your name," she said. "I believe you. I don't want a house, or a fund, or headlines." "Good, because what I have to offer now isn't made of money." She swallowed. "Then what are you offering?" He was quiet, then said simply, "Presents." Ava leaned back, let the words settle. She didn't know if she believed him. But, for the first time, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt seen. It was supposed to be easier after the first meeting. At least, that's what Ava told herself. But the next morning, as she sat across from Ethan Caldwell for the second time, something felt heavier. Not hostile, just dense, like a storm waiting at the edges of the horizon. They had chosen a quiet spot in Colonial Lake Park. The water mirrored the early sunlight. Ducks drifted, joggers passed by, but the bench where they sat seemed cocooned in its own world. Ethan had brought coffee. She hadn't touched hers. "You said you want presents," Ava began, eyes fixed on the water. "But presence doesn't erase absence." He nodded. "I know. Do you?" He turned to look at her, face lined but open. "I'm trying." Ava took a breath. "Then tell me why. Not about money, not about your name, just why didn't you fight for her?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "Because I was young," he said at last. "Because I was stupid. And because I thought silence was safer." Ava finally looked at him. "Safer for who?" Ethan didn't flinch. "For me." She swallowed the rising heat in her throat. "And she paid for your silence with everything." "I know," he whispered. "And I hated myself for it. Every time I saw a mural, every time someone mentioned the name Rachel, every time I looked in the mirror and remembered what I didn't do." Ava's fingers tightened around her cup. "She told me once," Ava said quietly, "that she didn't want me growing up chasing someone who had already decided not to be found." Ethan winced. "You could have changed your mind. She gave you time, letters, she even sent a picture, and still, you stayed silent." He nodded slowly. "You're right. There's no defense for it. I failed her, and I failed you." They sat with that for a long time, not speaking, just letting it settle between them like ash. Then Ava reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter. Rachel's letter. She handed it to Ethan without a word. He unfolded it with hands that no longer shook, but when he reached the final lines, his lips pressed together hard. "Please, don't let your name be louder than your heart," he exhaled. "I don't deserve this grace," he murmured. "It's not grace," Ava said. "It's memory, and a warning." Ethan folded the letter slowly and returned it. "What would she have wanted?" he asked. "If she were here." Ava looked out at the lake. "For you to show up, without being asked." Later that afternoon, Ava visited Mrs. Thompson again. The older woman was in her garden, humming and pruning dead leaves from her lilies. "How did it go?" she asked as Ava approached. "Hard," Ava admitted. Honest and hard. Mrs. Thompson smiled. That sounds about right. He read the letter. Mom's letter. Mrs. Thompson paused. Did he say anything that mattered? Ava thought for a long moment. He didn't try to defend himself. Not once. Mrs. Thompson nodded. Sometimes, that's the most a man can give at first. The absence of excuses. Ava sat on the porch step. Do you think people really change? Not quickly, she said, but grief has a way of planting seeds, and if they're brave, they'll let it grow roots. Ava looked down at her palms. They were stained faintly with charcoal from the morning's sketching. Her mother used to call them maker's hands. I want to trust him, she said, but I don't know if I can. Mrs. Thompson put a hand on her shoulder. You don't need to trust the man he was, she said. Only the man he's choosing to be now. That night, Ethan stood alone in his study, the sketch Ava had given him still on the desk. Next to it now sat Rachel's letter. Beside both he placed something new, a framed photo of Rachel smiling wide, wind in her hair, holding baby Ava. He stared at it for a long time. Then he pulled out a notepad and began to write. Dear Ava, I can't ask you to forgive me, but I want you to know who I was, who I became, and who I hope to be. Not for image, not for legacy, but because you looked me in the eye and made me remember what love costs when it's buried. This isn't a letter of redemption, it's a beginning. He set the pen down. He didn't know if she would want to read it, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't writing to be understood. He was writing to be real. The press conference was scheduled for 11:00 a.m. The venue, Langford Hall's Grand Atrium. The purpose, a routine annual update from the Caldwell Foundation. Or so everyone thought. Ava hadn't planned to watch it. She didn't even own a TV, but Mrs. Thompson did. And when she called that morning with a short, firm, "Turn it on, baby," Ava didn't argue. She sat cross-legged on the couch, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea as the screen flickered to life. The podium stood empty for a few seconds. Then Ethan stepped out. No flashy entrance, no branded banners, no team of assistants behind him. Just Ethan Caldwell. He looked smaller, or maybe just more human. Ava didn't blink. Thank you all for coming, Ethan began. His voice echoed gently through the marble space. I was supposed to talk to you today about expansion plans, investments, community outreach. I have those notes here. He held up a folded page, then set it aside. But I'm not going to read them, because something more important needs to be said, something I should have said 20 years ago. In the back of the room, reporters exchanged glances. Ethan inhaled. In 2001, I fell in love with a woman named Rachel Monroe. She was an artist, brilliant, unapologetic. She saw the world in color when I was still trying to paint everything gray. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. I let her go. Worse, I let silence speak in my place. I was afraid of my family, my name, my legacy, and in that fear I lost something irreplaceable. He paused. She left Charleston a few months later. I never knew she was pregnant. She didn't tell me. Maybe she didn't trust me, and she had every right not to. Ava felt her chest tighten. He was doing it. He was telling the truth. 21 years later, Ethan continued, I met her daughter. A few cameras clicked. She didn't ask for anything, no money, no attention. She simply pointed to a mark on my wrist and said, my father had the same one. He lifted his hand now, showing the faded crescent. And in that moment, everything I'd buried came back. The silence, the loss, the love, all of it. A hush fell over the room. I am not here today to rewrite the past, but I am here to stop hiding from it. Rachel Monroe mattered. She mattered to me, and her daughter matters now. He stepped back. This isn't a press release, it's a confession. Then he walked away. No questions, no prepared statements, just the truth. At home, Ava sat frozen. The mug in her hands had gone cold. Her heart hadn't. Mrs. Thompson wiped her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. "He did it," she whispered. Ava didn't speak. She wasn't sure she could, because part of her had always believed that moment would never come, that men like Ethan stayed safe behind boardrooms and silence. But today, he had stepped into the light. An hour later, her inbox overflowed. Blog followers, old art teachers, former classmates, even strangers. Messages like, "Your story gave me courage to ask my father about my birth mom. I didn't know how much I needed to hear someone say what you said." And one message without a subject line, from an anonymous email, "He was my friend too. You did the right thing. Thank you for speaking when he couldn't." Ava closed her laptop. The world was watching now, but strangely, she didn't feel exposed. She felt released. That evening, Ethan sent her a single-line message. "I know words aren't enough, but I'll keep showing up, one at a time." She stared at it for a long moment, then replied, "Then show up at the gallery tomorrow night. Not as a donor, just as someone who remembers her." The gallery was modest, a whitewashed brick building tucked between a bakery and a florist on Broad Street, its glass doors usually unnoticed by anyone not already looking. But tonight, the small room buzzed. Local artists, community leaders, teachers, students, strangers who had read Ava's blog and quietly followed her story. A banner hung above the entrance. "Legacy and Visibility. Stories Unforgotten." Inside, the walls were lined with paintings and sketches, portraits, hands, rooftops, and rivers. And in the center of it all, on a pedestal beneath a soft spotlight, stood one small framed sketch, 3 hands, each bearing the same crescent-shaped birthmark. Ava stood off to the side, her sketchbook tucked beneath her arm, breath slow but steady. She wore a navy blue dress, simple but strong, the same one her mother once wore to an open mic night nearly 20 years earlier. She had never spoken publicly before, not like this. When the moderator introduced her, she stepped up slowly, the microphone shaking slightly in her grip. Her eyes swept the crowd, then landed on one figure standing alone near the back. Ethan Caldwell. He gave no nod, no wave, just listened. Ava began, "My name is Ava Monroe." She paused. "My mother's name was Rachel Monroe." Even saying it aloud made her voice catch in her chest. She was a painter and a poet, though she never published. She believed art could outlast pain, that color could speak where words failed. A hush settled over the room. "She raised me alone, worked 2 jobs, painted on the side of grocery bags when we couldn't afford canvas. She once told me, 'Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who remembers your name when no one else does.'" Ava looked down, then back up. "For a long time, I didn't know who my father was. I only knew what my mother left me: honesty, resilience, and silence." Ethan closed his eyes. This past month, that silence broke. Not with accusations, not with demands, but with a question. "Do I matter? Does she?" Ava's voice didn't waver. "I speak tonight not to shame anyone. I speak because Rachel Monroe mattered, and too many women like her go unspoken, their names lost to power, fear, or forgetting." She glanced at the sketch. "So this is me, saying her name out loud, in a gallery, in her city, because she painted in the shadows for too long." A pause, then applause, slow, rising, real. Ethan didn't approach her afterward. Not right away. He wandered the room slowly, hands clasped behind his back. He stopped in front of a canvas of a riverbank, painted in muted blues and greens. The brushstrokes were Rachel's. She had painted that place the summer they met. He stood there for a long time, then turned. Ava was speaking to an elderly woman, thanking her for coming. When she caught his gaze, she excused herself and walked over. "You came," she said simply. "I did." He looked around. "She's here. In all of this." Ava nodded. "I didn't know what it would feel like to say her name in a room full of people," she said. "How did it feel?" A long pause. "Like reclaiming something no one had the right to take." He swallowed hard. "I never said it, Ava. Not once. Not to anyone. And that was wrong." "Now you have." He looked at the sketch again. "Can I buy that?" Ava almost smiled. "No, but you can help me frame it better." He nodded. "You speak like her," he said. "And you're starting to listen like her," she replied. For the first time, they smiled at the same time. The box arrived 2 days later. No return address. Just a plain, worn cardboard package placed gently on the front steps of Ava's apartment by someone who hadn't wanted to be seen. She brought it inside slowly, setting it on her kitchen table like it might breathe. It smelled faintly of dust and cedar. The tape had yellowed. Her fingers hesitated over the seam, then slid a knife through it with one smooth motion. Inside, canvas, papers, and a spiral notebook with a broken spine. A folded note rested on top. "You don't know me, but I knew your mother. She stored this at the studio on Beaufort before it closed. I always meant to return it to her, but now it belongs to you." No name, just initials, L.K. Ava sat down, breath caught somewhere between memory and disbelief. She picked up the spiral notebook first. The cover was soft with age. Inside, pages of sketches and half-written poems, her mother's handwriting, still sharp and fast. But halfway through, Ava found something new, something she had never seen before. A letter. Unsent. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I never got the courage to send it. Maybe I thought you'd never read it, or maybe I thought I'd stop needing you to, but you should know, she has your mind, not just your eyes. The way she dissects the world, the way she sketches what others miss. That didn't come from me. She'll grow up wondering, and I can't stop that. But I hope one day you'll be braver than I was." Ava's eyes blurred. It was dated August 2003. She had been barely 6 months old. That evening she met Ethan at the pier. The wind was brisk, tugging at her coat. Pelicans circled lazily above the waves. He was already there, hands in his pockets, staring out at the horizon. She walked up beside him and handed him the notebook. "It showed up today," she said, "from a stranger." Ethan turned the pages slowly, reverently. When he reached the letter, he stopped. Read it once, then again. His jaw tightened. "She was always the one who saw further than me," he said quietly. "You were mentioned. But it wasn't about you. It was about me." Ethan nodded. "Because she always loved forward." Ava looked away. "You should have known her longer." He didn't respond, because there was no answer for that, and the next day the story hit the press. Not the one Ethan had written. A columnist had dug into Rachel's past. An article surfaced online. The painter behind the power. Who was Rachel Monroe? It wasn't kind. It framed her as a young, idealistic single mother who had an affair with a rising magnate and vanished. Ava saw it first. She closed her laptop slowly, rage rising in her chest like fire. She forwarded it to Ethan with one line. "Do you still want to be present when it gets ugly? Because it's here." Ethan called within minutes. "Ava, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't, because this world never questions the powerful, only the ones they leave behind. Let me fix this. You can't erase it, but you can face it, publicly, not just in letters or quiet moments." Silence. Then, "Tell me where to be." Ava stared at the wall for a long moment, then replied, "Magnolia Grove, Sunday, noon." That Sunday, beneath the bloom-heavy branches of the magnolia trees, Ava stood at her mother's grave. A small crowd had gathered, some friends, a few former students, even strangers who had followed the story online. And Ethan. He stepped forward. No podium, no notes, just him. "I failed Rachel Monroe," he said clearly. "In silence, in absence, and in fear. And the world is still trying to write her out of her own story. But she was never a footnote." Ava watched him, arms folded. He continued, "This is not about image. This is about truth. She mattered, and I see now that if we don't speak their names, the world forgets too easily." He turned to face the grave. "I remember you, Rachel, and I am so sorry it took me this long." No applause, just wind, and a slow, shared exhale from those who had waited too long to hear that name said aloud. The days after the speech were quiet. No more articles, no new headlines, just the long hush of aftermath, the kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, but waits to see what rises in its place. Ava moved through those days carefully. She still went to the studio, still taught her weekend art classes, but something about her posture changed. Not heavier, just more aware of the weight she carried and where it came from. She thought of her mother constantly, but the memory wasn't sharp anymore. It softened. A warmth, a presence, a quiet voice in her ear reminding her to breathe through the anger. On Thursday afternoon, as she was closing up the studio, the door opened. She turned, expecting a late student. Instead, it was a woman. Early 60s, salt and pepper hair, long gray coat. Her expression was unreadable. "You're Ava Monroe," she said. Ava straightened. "Yes." The woman stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "My name is Margaret Caldwell." Ava blinked. "Ethan's sister. I thought I should meet you, before this turns into something bigger than either of us can control." Ava crossed her arms. "I'm not looking for control, or inheritance." Margaret gave a small, humorless smile. "I didn't think you were, which is why I came." She looked around the studio, the sketches, the colors, the rawness. "My brother's made many mistakes," she said, "but this story, if left to the press, won't end the way either of you wants it to." Ava didn't answer. Margaret walked over to one of the hanging canvases, a riverbank framed in fading blue. "Did Rachel paint this?" "Yes, the summer before I was born." "She was talented," Margaret said. "I met her once, you know. Ethan brought her to our mother's garden party. It lasted 20 minutes. Ava waited. "Our father had a fit, called her unsuitable, dangerous to the family name. Ethan never brought her around again." A long pause. "She wasn't dangerous, but she made us look too closely at ourselves." Ava leaned back against the wall. "So why are you here, Margaret?" Margaret met her eyes. "Because the board is worried, and because you deserve to know what you're stepping into. If Ethan gives you a place in his will, if he brings you into the foundation, you will be dissected. Your life, your name, your motives. So, you're here to warn me off?" "No," Margaret said. "I'm here to tell you that if you choose to step forward, do it with your eyes open, and don't let them turn you into a headline." Ava nodded slowly. "I wasn't planning to take his name, but I am keeping hers." Margaret smiled, this time with something real in it. "Good. She deserves that." That night, Ava met Ethan for dinner. Not at a restaurant. At Rachel's old spot, a picnic bench near the edge of Colonial Lake, where she used to sit and sketch the ripples. They shared takeout, sat in the cold, didn't say much. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "My sister came to see you." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You sent her?" "No, Margaret doesn't ask permission. She said the board's worried." Ethan nodded. "They always are, but this isn't their legacy. It's mine." He looked down at his hands. "I put your name in the next proposal, not for the press, for the future, as co-curator of the new Community Arts Center, named for Rachel." Ava was still, then quietly, That name belongs in stone, not silence. Ethan looked up. Is that a yes? Ava didn't answer right away, then, if I say yes, I need to do it on my own terms, not as your daughter, as her legacy. Then that's what we build. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Ava reached into her bag and handed him a small canvas. On it, she had painted a bridge. Rough brush strokes. Unfinished, but strong. She didn't say what it meant. He didn't ask. But both of them understood. Some things aren't restored. They're rebuilt. Together. The renovation began with dust. Ava stood in the middle of the old firehouse on Calhoun Street, what would soon become the Rachel Monroe Community Arts Center. Sunlight streamed through shattered windows, scattering across paint-chipped brick and echoes of forgotten stories. She ran her fingers along the edge of a broken sill. The building had been neglected for years, but it had good bones. The same way her mother used to describe Ava's first drawings. Imperfect, but full of promise. Ethan entered from the side door, hard hat in hand. They started the plumbing, he said. Ava nodded. Good. The sink in the back leaks like a memory. He chuckled. You always talk like that? Only when I'm nervous. Ethan didn't press. He just stood beside her, looking out over the raw space that would, if they got it right, hold color and hope again. 2 weeks later, the front wall was painted white. Ava stood before it, brush in hand. She hadn't planned to be the one to paint the first mural, but when the other artists offered the wall to her, she didn't say no. She painted in silence, remembering how Rachel always began with shadow, never light. Build the dark, her mother once said, and the light will know where to fall. The mural took shape slowly, not of Rachel, of hands, women's hands, some rough, some delicate, some painted with rings or dirt or ink, all of them reaching. When it was done, Ava stepped back and let the tears fall. Quietly, not from grief, but from relief. She wasn't erasing silence. She was painting over it. The night of the soft opening, the center buzzed. Local press came. So did families, kids, teachers, and strangers who had followed the blog. No grand speeches, just music, paint, and light. Ava stood near the entryway, watching as guests moved from piece to piece. Some paused before the mural. Some didn't. That was okay. She felt Ethan approach before she saw him. You look like your mother, he said. Everyone keeps saying that. They're right. But tonight, you sound like her too. She turned to him. And you? Do you see yourself in this? He looked around. Not yet, but I see the part of me I left behind. She nodded. Then maybe it's time to pick it up. He held out a hand. Not ceremonially. Just as a gesture, to help, to hold, to begin. She took it. Later that night, after the guest had gone, Ava stood in the main hall alone. She looked around at the space, the lights, the laughter still lingering in the air, the mural breathing on the wall like it had always belonged. She opened her sketchbook, wrote a single line. Legacy is not what you inherit. It's what you dare to name. Then she closed the book, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was carrying her mother's story. She felt like she was writing her own. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was 2 days away. Ava stood alone in the back room of the center, sorting through a final box of supplies donated by a retired curator. Most of it was routine. Sketch pads, brushes, unused paints. But at the bottom, tucked between a stack of old journals, was a sealed envelope. Her name was written on it. Ava, nothing else. No return address, no date. The handwriting was her mother's, but different. Less careful, less polished, almost unfinished. Ava sat down slowly, the letter in her lap. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were 2 pages. The paper was thin, creased, and soft at the folds. My Ava, if you're reading this, it means I didn't say enough. Or maybe I didn't say it the right way. I don't know which will be harder for you. learning that I kept things from you, or realizing that some of those things were kept to protect myself, not just you. I loved Ethan. I never stopped, even when he vanished into his silence, even when I told myself I hated him. But I couldn't bring that into your childhood. I wanted you to have strength, not longing. But I know now that strength without truth isn't real. It's just a mask. I didn't tell you the whole truth about the last time we spoke. I had a choice. I could have reached out. I could have told him. But I was angry, and I was proud. And that pride became a wall I didn't know how to tear down. You have every right to be angry with both of us. But if he's still alive, and if he ever shows up, I hope you don't just see him as the man who disappeared. I hope you see the part of him that made you who you are, the part of him I loved, the part I never could hate, no matter how hard I tried. Forgiveness isn't an obligation, Ava. It's a door, one you get to open or not. But don't leave it closed just because I did. If there's light in you, let it reach him too. And if you ever wonder whether I would have done it differently, the answer is yes. 1,000 times yes. Love, Mom. Ava folded the letter back into the envelope and placed it gently on the table. For a long time, she didn't cry. She just sat in silence, letting the words settle in the spaces her mother had once left empty. That evening, she called Ethan. "Can you meet me at the center?" He didn't ask why. He just said, "I'll be there in 20. They stood together in the main gallery, beneath the mural of reaching hands. Ava handed him the envelope. He didn't read it right away. He just looked at her. "Are you okay?" She gave a small nod. "I am," because she was honest. Finally, even in the places that hurt. Ethan opened the letter. He read every line. When he finished, he pressed it to his chest. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "She forgave me before I knew I needed it." Ava looked up. She forgave herself, too. That's what matters to me most. Ethan swallowed hard. "Do you?" "I'm working on it." She stepped back and looked around the room. "Tomorrow, when we cut the ribbon, it won't be about you or me. It'll be about her and every woman who was ever silenced and chose to speak anyway." Ethan nodded. "Then I'll stand where I belong, in the back, bearing witness." Ava turned to him. "Not in the back. Beside me. If you're ready to stop hiding." His eyes filled. "I am." She extended her hand. He took it, not for ceremony, for history, for healing. The next morning, the city gathered. A red ribbon stretched across the double doors of the Rachel Monroe Community Arts Center. Ava held the scissors in one hand. Ethan stood beside her. Camera shutters clicked, but her eyes were only on the sky. The wind picked up, and for a moment it felt like Rachel was there. Not behind them, not above them, but through them. Ava cut the ribbon, and the doors opened. To light, to color, to story, and to a legacy finally named.